At most, licenses for digital banks here in the Philippines will be limited to seven. I mean, five have already been approved. You have two that's still up for evaluation. Is that amount or is that number enough to actually advance innovation and financial inclusion through digital banking?
Yes, I think so. Disrupting the banking sector was never about the quantity of new digital banks, but their quality and what value these banks can bring to the table. So if a bank has a revolutionary new product that closes inefficiencies or benefits consumers, it is already capable of disrupting the status quo, and you do not need many different banks to do that. So rather than having, say, 30 banks, each one with ₦1 billion in capital, I think having, say, three new entrants, each with 10 billion to invest, is more likely to challenge the incumbents and bring about change. So remember, in a digital banking model, you may have a very low marginal cost of servicing an additional customer, but there's still a basic fixed cost. So you will need to attain a minimum scale for the business to be viable. And banks are much less likely to reach this critical mass if there are 30 of them competing for revenues rather than three.
Mhm.
Also, the conventional banks are not standing still, right? They may not hold a digital banking license per se, but many of them do have very compelling digital offerings, and they can do the same things that digital banks promise to do. So really, we already have 40, 50 banks competing in this space and not just seven.
Again, but give us an idea first. What's the regional standard here when it comes to the number of digital players in in the banking sector, and how is the Philippines faring compared to our regional peers? Are we far behind?
So the standard varies. Okay, this is an evolving space. Every market is trying to figure it out. So Singapore has awarded four licenses, and Malaysia is due to award up to five. Okay, so in that sense, I guess it's in the ballpark. But I guess the Philippines has taken a slightly different approach in how we bring about how we bring in these digital banks. So in Singapore and Malaysia, for example, the regulators have specified deadlines on when you submit applications, when successful applicants will be announced, and when operations will commence.
Mhm.
They then evaluate all these applications from the entire pool and try to screen for the most promising ones. Right. As a result, none of the digital banks in Singapore or Malaysia have started operating. Whereas in the Philippines, BSP has quickly reviewed applications and awarded licenses to qualifying candidates as and when they come in. And as a result, several are already in operation, just months after the guidelines on digital banks were first released. So as BSP described it, it was on a process on a first come, first served basis. Right. Having said that, we should note that the digital delivery of banking services has been around for many years, for decades. Right. Banks just didn't hold a digital bank license per se.
The PSP has set a goal of to bring 70% of Filipino adults into the bank population by 2023. How far along are we into reaching that goal, especially now with the push for digital banking?
So the goal is an admirable one, but it's also a very challenging and ambitious one. And the digital delivery of banking services, whether by a digital bank or a conventional bank, should greatly accelerate this effort. Last year, we already saw significant strides in new account openings and the use of e-payments because of social distancing. All this happened before the first digital bank licenses were first awarded. So it may well be accelerated by their entry, but like we said earlier, the marginal cost of providing a deposit account digitally is nearly zero. You don't need many different digital banks to achieve that. Instead, a lot of the success requires progress on the non-banking fronts that I talked about earlier. So I don't think having this cap necessarily contradicts the financial inclusion goal. Having said that, going from 70% unbanked to 70% banked is very challenging.